At 59, Janet Jackson's life has faced a heartbreak few could imagine. Behind the glittering stage, the sold-out arenas, and the iconic hits, a personal tragedy has quietly shadowed her, leaving fans shocked and heartbroken. This is not just another celebrity story. It's a raw, human tale of loss, resilience, and the unexpected challenges that even superstars cannot escape. Discover the truth behind the headlines and the unseen struggles of a pop legend. Janet Jackson's story begins in a tiny two-room house in Gary, Indiana, where she was born on May 16, 1966, as the youngest of 10 children. Life in the Jackson household was cramped and chaotic, with siblings sleeping head to toe, their feet brushing against each other, and the kitchen serving as dining room, study space, and rehearsal hall all at once. Poverty was a constant presence. Her father, Joseph Jackson, worked long hours in the steel mills and played guitar at night to make extra money, while her mother, Catherine, juggled part-time jobs, household duties, and the impossible task of keeping 10 children fed and disciplined. Love was present, but it was often overshadowed by strict rules, harsh discipline, and a relentless expectation to perform. Mistakes were punished, and affection was measured in silence and obedience. Even before Janet took her first steps into fame, tragedy had already marked her life. Her parents had endured the death of her older brother Brandon, whose passing left a quiet emptiness that seemed stitched into the family's daily life. Janet grew up feeling both the closeness of siblings and the weight of absence, learning early that life could be unfair, love could be complicated, and childhood could feel both crowded and lonely at the same time. She watched her older brothers, especially Michael, rise in the world of music, and while proud, she also felt invisible, a young girl in the shadow of extraordinary talent. Despite the challenges, small sparks of Janet's own spirit emerged. She loved music, she loved to dance, and she longed to be seen as herself, not just as the youngest Jackson or Michael's little sister. But her childhood was a paradox. She was part of a family destined for stardom, yet trapped in poverty and strict discipline. Dreams were both nurtured and constrained, and Janet learned early that success required hard work, resilience, and the courage to survive in a world that demanded perfection. These formative years, though filled with hardship, laid the foundation for the woman she would become, a powerhouse performer, a survivor, and an icon who could transform pain into music, discipline into rhythm, and loneliness into determination. In those small, crowded rooms of Gary, Indiana, Janet's story began. It was a story of struggle, but also the quiet birth of strength. A young girl learning that even in the hardest circumstances, her voice, her presence, and her spirit mattered. Those early hardships would not define her limits. They would shape her endurance, her creativity, and her unshakable will to rise above every obstacle life put in her path. Janet Jackson's journey into the entertainment world began almost as soon as she could walk. Growing up as the youngest in a family of performers, she was surrounded by music, dance, and the constant hum of ambition. Her older brothers were already blazing a trail with the Jackson 5, and from the start, Janet was caught between admiration and the struggle to be seen as her own person. Life had taught her early that being part of a famous family came with privileges, but it also carried enormous expectations. In a household where talent was currency, even a misstep could feel like failure. Her earliest experiences in front of cameras and crowds were a mix of excitement and pressure. By age 7, she was performing on the MGM Grand stage in Las Vegas, wearing rehearsed smiles and moving with precision. While other children played with dolls or ran freely through their neighborhoods, Janet was learning the discipline of a performer, practicing routines under harsh lights, while her father, Joseph, watched with a critical eye. He was a man who equated love with rigor. And for Janet, every note sung, every dance step executed, was a lesson in survival. From those moments, she understood that the world didn't pause for childhood innocence. It demanded excellence, even from a girl barely out of diapers. Janet's first forays into television and acting were both opportunities and trials. She appeared on shows like Good Times, playing a child from a broken home, and on the family variety show The Jacksons, where she had to mimic perfection. Behind the camera, she was still a young girl learning to assert herself. On camera, she was a polished product, molded by family ambition and industry expectations. She began to understand the tension between identity and performance, the need to find her own voice while others dictated who she should be. Her early albums, released under her father's supervision, reflected this struggle. Though they showcased her talent, They lacked the authenticity that Janet craved. She was the youngest Jackson, Michael's sister, and part of a legacy she didn't fully own. Her voice was there, but her soul had not yet emerged. By the early 1980s, Janet realized that to grow as an artist, she would have to claim independence. The turning point came with the release of her third and fourth albums, which hinted at her potential but also highlighted the limitations of remaining under her father's strict control. She understood that fame could be both a ladder and a cage. The pressure of comparison to Michael, the relentless guidance of Joseph, and the demands of a music industry still dominated by male executives made her early career feel like a constant battle. She wanted to sing, dance, and create on her own terms, but every decision was scrutinized, and every move had to navigate the complex dynamics of family and fame. Janet's fight for independence was not just a professional struggle, it was deeply personal. She had to assert her identity against a backdrop of authority, expectation, and history. In 1986, she made a bold and defining decision. She severed ties with her father's management. It was a move fraught with risk. Joseph had been the architect of the Jackson Empire, and stepping away from his guidance meant Janet would have to navigate a world that had never been fully hers. But she was determined. She partnered with producers Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, trusting them to help craft a sound and style that reflected her personality, rather than her family name. What emerged was Control, an album that was more than a collection of songs. It was a declaration. Janet Jackson was no longer just Michael's little sister. She was a woman with her own voice, her own rhythm, her own vision. The process of creating Control was grueling. Janet poured herself into the studio with a level of intensity that matched the pressure she had carried since childhood. Every beat, every lyric, every dance move was meticulously crafted. She learned to harness her pain, her ambition, and her experience under the spotlight into something transformative. The album's themes of independence, self-determination, and empowerment resonated with millions. It was not merely music. It was Janet Jackson staking her claim on the world. With Control, Janet achieved what few had dared to dream. She became a force in her own right, breaking free from the constraints of family expectation and industry skepticism. The album produced hits like Nasty and What Have You Done For Me Lately, and established her as a cultural icon. But the triumph came with ongoing challenges. Every performance, every public appearance, and every new release required her to defend her independence, to prove repeatedly that she was not simply riding the coattails of her family legacy. Critics and fans alike scrutinized her every move, but Janet had learned to transform pressure into performance, criticism into courage. Her early career was a masterclass in resilience. Janet Jackson faced a world that often underestimated her, an industry that was slow to recognize women as autonomous artists, and a family dynamic that demanded loyalty even when it conflicted with her desires. Through it all, she discovered the power of self-definition, the importance of artistic integrity, and the necessity of courage in claiming one's path. By the time she launched Rhythm Nation 1814 in 1989, Janet had not just survived her early career. She had emerged as a trailblazer, ready to redefine pop music, challenge social norms, and inspire generations with her voice, her vision, and her unshakable independence. It's about time. And from cramped rooms in Gary, Indiana, to the studios of Los Angeles and the stages of global tours, Janet Jackson's early career was a story of struggle, perseverance, and ultimate self-assertion. Every hardship, every moment of doubt, every obstacle she faced forged her identity. She learned that independence is not given. It is earned. Often in the fire of challenge and the quiet battles fought away from the cameras, and in claiming her freedom, Janet Jackson became not just a star, but a woman who defined her own destiny, proving that true greatness is born from both talent and the courage to take control of one's life. Janet Jackson's life has been a symphony of triumphs and heartbreaks, and while the world often saw her dazzling on stage, behind the spotlight her personal life carried scars that never fully healed. The youngest in a family of 10 children, Janet grew up navigating a world of strict rules, high expectations, and relentless discipline. Her father, Joseph, demanded perfection, calling for obedience above all else, and shaping her life around rehearsals, cameras, and public appearances. In this environment, love was often measured in control and performance, and the warmth of ordinary childhood was a scarce commodity. She learned early that life was not gentle, and those early lessons of discipline and sacrifice became the foundation for both her strength and her vulnerability. Even as she became a global icon, Janet's personal life was marked by turbulence and loss. Her first marriage at the age of 18 to singer James DeBarge seemed at first like a way to carve a space of autonomy from the oppressive grip of her father. It was a quiet escape, a fragile hope for intimacy and love beyond the family's high-pressure world. But reality soon intruded. James struggled with personal demons and addictions that Janet, still young and learning the limits of her own resilience, could not fix. Their union dissolved within months, leaving a lingering wound that went beyond heartbreak. It was a lesson in the cruel truth that love does not always heal, and freedom does not always arrive in the forms we hope for. Tabloids whispered lies about her, claiming she had secretly borne a child during the marriage, and for decades Janet carried the burden of rumors she never deserved. It was a bitter introduction to the way the world scrutinized her private life, turning personal grief into public spectacle. Her second marriage, to dancer and choreographer Rene Elizondo Jr., offered the promise of sanctuary. For nearly a decade, they shared a life built on both creative collaboration and companionship. Rene became her partner in the studio, the hand that steadied hers through long nights of recording and rehearsing. He was part of the heartbeat of her artistry, helping craft albums that were deeply personal expressions of Janet's inner world. Yet even this union, built in relative privacy, could not withstand the pressures of fame, relentless work schedules, and unspoken distance. By the late 1990s, the marriage began to falter. Arguments replaced intimacy, and the sanctuary they had built quietly crumbled. The divorce became public, with legal battles dragging on for years and revealing the fragility behind the life she had carefully curated. The collapse of this marriage carried both emotional and financial weight, but most profoundly, it stripped Janet of a sense of personal security and stability. Once again, love, no matter how carefully nurtured, had failed to offer a permanent refuge. Amid these private struggles, Janet endured some of the most devastating losses imaginable. The sudden death of her brother Michael Jackson in 2009 was not merely the loss of a global superstar. It was the loss of the person who had shared her childhood, her triumphs, and her deepest confidences. Michael had been her mirror, protector, and the sibling who truly understood the peculiar pressures of being a Jackson. When he passed away, the shock was seismic, leaving Janet in a silence so profound it seemed to eclipse the noise of the world around her. The grief was compounded by the reality that Michael's children were left without their father, and Janet found herself both mourning her brother and attempting to support his children through an unimaginable loss. For years, she carried that grief privately, often finding herself revisiting memories in hotel rooms and personal spaces, away from the public eye, as she sought to reconcile the emptiness left by his absence. The losses did not stop there. In 2018, her father Joseph passed away at the age of 89, leaving a complicated legacy of discipline, drive, and emotional conflict. Janet mourned a man who had shaped her career, yet had inflicted deep wounds through severity and control. That grief was layered, paradoxical, and impossible to simplify. Then, in 2024, her older brother Tito died, the quiet, stabilizing presence in a family marked by brilliance and turbulence. The string of losses was relentless, each death reopening old wounds and deepening her solitude. What remained was a profound awareness of life's fragility and the absence of the people who had once anchored her existence. Alongside these personal tragedies, Janet faced the heartbreaks of motherhood and marriage later in life. In 2012, she married Wissam Al-Mana, a Qatari businessman, finding in him a calm and devoted partner who offered the sense of refuge she had long sought. At age 50, she gave birth to her son, Issa, a miraculous moment that brought joy and purpose into her life. But even this union was not immune to life's cruel symmetry. The marriage ended within months, leaving Janet to navigate single motherhood and the complex emotions of raising her son while managing her career and personal grief. The silence of separation, though quiet, carried immense weight, reminding her once again that even love carefully nurtured can falter, and that resilience must come from within. Through every heartbreak, Janet Jackson transformed pain into art. Albums like The Velvet Rope were confessional, therapeutic, and courageous, exposing her struggles with depression, identity, and loss. She bled her experiences into her music, giving voice to her private anguish and, in doing so, created a lifeline for millions who listened. Scandals, rumors, and the harsh judgment of the media tested her repeatedly, but she emerged not as a victim, but as a survivor, harnessing heartbreak as a catalyst for strength. Her life is a testament to endurance, showing that resilience is forged not in the absence of tragedy, but in the ability to continue, to create, to love, and to nurture in spite of it. Janet Jackson's personal tragedies, from failed marriages to the deaths of family members, shaped not only the artist the world adored, but the human being who continues to rise, transform, and find purpose amid grief. Her journey through heartbreak is ongoing, yet with each loss and every sorrow, Janet has cultivated wisdom, empathy, and an unshakable connection to what truly matters: family, creativity, and the legacy of a life lived fully, even when shadowed by tragedy. In her music, in her advocacy, and in the quiet moments with her son, she continues to teach that pain can be endured, scars can be honored, and the human spirit can remain unbroken, no matter how heavy the cost. Through every personal tragedy, Janet Jackson remains a living example that heartbreak, while inevitable, can become the foundation of profound resilience and enduring grace. Janet Jackson's life is a testament to the power of resilience, the depth of personal transformation, and the enduring impact of a legacy built over decades of struggle, creativity, and courage. From her earliest days in Gary, Indiana, Janet's story was shaped by extremes: poverty and ambition, discipline and freedom, loss and triumph. As the youngest of 10 children in a family whose name would change the world of music forever, she learned early that life would not hand her ease or comfort. Every step forward required work, determination, and an unshakable belief in herself, even when the pressures from her father, Joseph Jackson, seemed impossible to bear. Her childhood was a crucible, shaping a young girl who would grow into one of the most powerful and influential women in pop culture. The strict discipline, the constant push for perfection, and the exposure to the spotlight at an age when most children were learning to play freely, instilled in Janet both strength and a sense of responsibility. She understood that her life and choices were not just about her own survival. They were about representing her family, her community, and ultimately herself in a world that often demanded perfection from young Black women in the public eye. Janet's journey to finding her own voice was neither simple nor immediate. The shadows of her older brothers, particularly Michael Jackson, loomed large, and for years she was seen primarily in relation to them rather than as an individual artist. Early albums were constrained by the influence of family management, industry expectations, and a system that often prioritized commercial success over personal expression. Yet Janet was determined to break free. Her landmark 1986 album, Control, was not only a declaration of artistic independence, but also a manifesto of personal empowerment. With Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis guiding production, Janet reclaimed her voice, asserting herself as a woman in control of her career, her body, and her identity. It was a turning point that reshaped her place in music history. Suddenly, the world could no longer see her merely as Michael Jackson's sister. She was Janet Jackson, a force unto herself. The album's success was staggering, but the path to it had been paved with personal sacrifice and relentless dedication. Hours in the studio, grueling rehearsals, and the emotional labor of asserting independence all contributed to the creation of something that was both commercially triumphant and deeply personal. Janet's resilience was evident not only in the music she created, but in the way she navigated the pressures of fame and family expectations, balancing the demands of a public career with her own need for identity and expression. Success did not shield Janet from hardship, however. The personal tragedies that punctuated her life, failed marriages, the death of her beloved brother Michael in 2009, the passing of her father Joseph in 2018, and the death of Tito Jackson in 2024, left indelible marks on her heart. Each loss reminded her of life's fragility, the impermanence of connection, and the necessity of finding strength within herself. The death of Michael, in particular, was a wound unlike any other. He had been more than a sibling. He was her mirror, protector, collaborator, and lifelong companion. His sudden absence left a silence that no stage, no audience, and no performance could fill. Janet grieved privately, away from the public eye, carrying the weight of a bond that had defined her childhood and shaped her career. The grief deepened with the loss of other family members, each death reopening old wounds and reminding Janet that legacy and loss often travel hand in hand. Yet she persisted, transforming her pain into creative energy, advocacy, and love for her son Issa, born when she was 50. His presence became both anchor and inspiration, proving that life's greatest rewards can emerge even amid heartbreak. Janet's resilience extends beyond her personal life, into her professional choices and philanthropic work. She has remained a global icon, not simply because of her talent, But because of her ability to reinvent herself, to turn adversity into art, and to use her platform to address social issues and give back, Rhythm Nation 1814 was not just an album. It was a cultural movement that confronted racial inequality, poverty, and injustice, and its messages continue to resonate decades later. Throughout her career, Janet has consistently fused entertainment with empowerment, teaching audiences that music can be both pleasurable and transformative. She has used her influence to support causes quietly yet profoundly, donating millions to education, disaster relief, and children's hospitals, as well as advocating for health and wellness initiatives. These acts of giving, often away from the media spotlight, reveal a woman who understands the importance of legacy, not only through art, but through action. Today, Janet Jackson's life is a balance of continued creative expression, personal fulfillment, and deep commitment to her family. With her son, Issa, she has cultivated a life filled with ordinary joys that are extraordinary precisely because they are private and unhurried. Mornings spent at school, afternoons in the park, and evenings sharing stories and lullabies have become her sanctuary, a stark contrast to the whirlwind of fame she has navigated for decades. Her homes in Los Angeles and London reflect this desire for peace, prioritizing privacy and comfort over opulence, allowing her son to grow with the normalcy she never had. Even as she returns to the stage, as in her 2023 Together Again tour, Janet carries herself not just as a performer, but as a woman who has endured life's trials and emerged wiser, stronger, and deeply aware of what truly matters. Janet Jackson's legacy is multifaceted. She is a musical innovator, a cultural icon, a mother, a philanthropist, and a symbol of resilience. Every triumph has been hard-won, every song infused with lessons learned from heartbreak, discipline, and perseverance. Her career proves that resilience is not simply the ability to survive, but the courage to create, to love, and to live fully despite the scars of life. Even at 59, Janet embodies a rare blend of grace, strength, and purpose. Her influence stretches across generations, inspiring not only fans, but also artists who follow in her footsteps. Through the turbulence of her personal life, the rigor of her professional journey, and the ongoing evolution of her artistry, Janet has taught the world that enduring influence is not measured solely by fame or fortune, but by the ability to rise, transform, and give back, even after life has tested you beyond measure. Her story is one of contrasts: the stage and the home, applause and silence, fame and intimacy, loss and triumph. Janet has navigated all of these extremes with an unwavering commitment to authenticity. She has turned tragedy into artistry, heartbreak into resilience, and the pressures of public life into lessons of strength. Today, she lives as a woman fully aware of her history, honoring both the pain and the joy that have shaped her. She teaches that true legacy is built not merely on records sold or accolades earned, but on the ability to endure, to love, and to leave the world better than you found it. Janet Jackson's life, at its core, is a living testament to survival, reinvention, and the enduring power of grace. She has transformed the scars of her past into a rhythm that continues to inspire, reminding the world that resilience is not the absence of hardship, but the unwavering determination to rise, to create, and to live fully, even when the odds seem insurmountable. Her story continues, quietly, boldly, and powerfully. In the laughter of her son, the music she still creates, and the impact she leaves on every listener who has felt her beat, Janet Jackson proves that a life of trials, triumphs, and transformation can be not only survived, but celebrated, honored, and immortalized.